We all want to just welcome everybody again. This will be our last Promising Practices Roundtable for this semester. Um, we know May is super busy, so wanted to also be respectful of that while celebrations are happening. And for today, we'll be talking about professional development for undocumented students. So we do have panelists here, which will also share some of the best practices from them. And next slide. Our objectives for today is that you all will be able to gain resources to create professional development opportunities for undocumented students, also learn different strategies that will support the professional development of undocumented students, and lastly, understand how department collaborations and off-campus partnerships can strengthen and sustain these opportunities.
And Marie, do you also want to introduce yourself before we get into the agenda?
Yes. My name is Maria Gutierrez, and I am the Immigrants Rising Higher Ed Manager. And I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself now.
Yes. Thank you, Maria. Madeline, she, her pronouns. I lead our higher education work at Immigrants Rising and really excited to see a lot of familiar faces joining us and some new folks also joining us today. And so we are kind of wrapping up our welcome and introductions right now. If you haven't gotten the chance, please introduce yourself in the chat, name, pronouns, org, campus, and role, just so we can see who's joining us. I think we actually have a lot of like statewide representation from all our different systems. And I think a few nonprofits as well joining us today. So welcome. And so before we hear from our amazing Promising Practices panel, we will be doing a quick overview of professional development opportunities available for undocumented students. So I think wherever you are in that kind of like journey, there's, I think, something to do to strengthen those opportunities, especially now with so much uncertainty for the community. And then we'll give folks a chance to kind of share some takeaways. We have an evaluation for you all to wrap up today so we can hear what went well and what do you want to see in the future. And then closing with just some remarks and just some additional resources to look out for Immigrants Rising. And as you can see, we are recording the meeting and all materials will also be shared that we're sharing with you all to all registrants too. So if folks didn't get to join but registered, they will be getting that too. And you can also pass this along to colleagues who didn't get to join us today. And I think I'll also give a quick time for our panelists to do some quick introductions too. You'll hear more from them during our panel, but we'll do a quick round of intros. We'll actually go in the order of the screen. So Amrit, if you can kick us off.
Okay. Okay, my camera is on. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
It's a little bit, you're
Okay.
underwater. Okay, I think it's getting better. That's okay.
Okay. Okay.
There you go.
Well, okay. Thank you so much. So, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaur. My pronouns are they, them, and I am one of the newest career staff members at the UC Davis Undocumented Student Research Center. And then just want to shout out one of my former colleagues at the center, Laura, is also on. Who's now at Immigrants Rising, of course. And then Daniela is also on, our interim director. So excited to be here with you all and to just learn from you all. Thank you.
Fidelia?
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Fidelia Flores. I am the Assistant Financial Aid Officer at Oxnard College, and then I'm also the Undocu Liaison on campus.
Thank you, Fidelia. And then Kim, if you want to close us off.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Gomez, but everyone calls me Kim. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm the director of the Dreamer Resource Center at Sacramento State.
Great, great. So this is just a small preview. You'll hear more from folks and the amazing work they're doing at their campuses later on. And then if you just haven't gotten a chance to introduce yourself, please keep throwing that in the chat so we can see who's here today.
Alrighty, and to kick us off, we're going to have a quick check-in question. So Feel free to grab your cell phones and scan the QR code, or you can also join using your desktop by going to slido.com and putting in that number. And the question will be, or the statement will be, my campus or organization is well versed in providing and or referring professional development opportunities for undocumented students. So we'll give a couple minutes for folks to get settled with that, and we'll see where folks are landing with that, and it'll give us a good idea of where we are and how in depth to go into this presentation today. And then also, as you are doing that, if any questions do come up at any time, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll be able to answer them as they're coming. Yeah, I see some responses coming in. We have 17, 18 folks that have answered. It looks like we have a little bit over half of folks who have answered it. Okay, and I think we're gonna start wrapping up, but thank you all for answering this. I think that it gives us a good insight just to know like where folks are. And of course, we hope that all of the resources in the panel will definitely help you all feel a little bit more prepared, or just even know about the different opportunities and what other campuses are doing. And then we'll go ahead and look at the slides. We are going to do another poll later on, so just a heads up on that. But we did kind of want to start with like the reality of professional development with undocumented students. There's a lot of barriers and maybe not as many opportunities if it was otherwise. But being a counselor, I also had to navigate these conversations with students in the past. And some of the tips is just like listen and validate the feelings. I think, especially given the political climate, it could be a very scary time. But then at the same time, how can we be empowering, honest, and realistic with the opportunities? And if you don't know the answer, say it's okay, like I don't know, but like let's figure it out. And hopefully we arm you with different resources to also be able to navigate those conversations, but also just offer reassurance and resources. And again, being undocumented doesn't mean that a person cannot pursue a career. Undocumented students can pursue many income generating opportunities, whether it is through professional development and then using those skills to start their own business and independent contracting in the future. There is also a guide that we will share, which also just addresses a conversation when a student might be like, well, I can't work, so I should maybe just not go to college. And that guide kind of gives different tips on how to navigate that conversation. But we just wanted to also set the reminder that students' immigration status is not static, sorry. So there can be opportunities and change that could happen, and just reminding them of that as well.
Great. And then thank you, Maria, for grounding us in that too. And so we do want to share a few resources, right, on how to connect students to those professional development opportunities. I think we saw from our check-in question that that's a growth area, right, whether for your campus, and that could mean like individually, maybe you're not quite yet sure about how to connect students to those professional development opportunities, or other folks on your campus don't, right? Like I think I've seen in the past that like Dream Center is very well equipped to provide those opportunities for folks, undocumented resource centers. But then if students don't end up at the Dream Center first, right, they may not get the right information and may not know that those opportunities are available for them. And so I think a starting point we want to share with you all is there are a lot of different fellowships as well as scholarships that are open to folks that do not require proof of citizenship. I think we post a lot on our social media, so we do keep a pretty updated list of scholarships and fellowships that do not require citizenship. So this could definitely be a starting point to share with students. And then we also have this really great resource called Applying for Scholarships and Fellowships that you see there on the screenshot that also gives students just some tools to support their search for those opportunities. And so that does include this essay worksheet to kind of help them brainstorm some of those fellowship essays, personal statements that's a requirement for applications, a search chart to keep them organized on when due dates are happening, and just some additional databases. So I think this could be a good starting point to show students that there are opportunities available, or even to share with campus allies and advocates. If there are questions around that, this is a good starting place to share with undocumented students. And then we're gonna have some of our panelists speak a little bit more about that, but I do also want to uplift existing opportunities already, right, that are drawing from state funds that undocumented students can also take advantage of. So we do have the California Dream Act Service Incentive Grant Program, or DSIG for short, and this is open to California Dream Act applicant students with either a Cal Grant A award, who meet Cal Grant B eligibility, or they have a Cal Grant B award. And what they're doing is they're actually doing community or volunteer service and getting a stipend for that, right? And so a way that this works is this is not like a job or employment for undocumented students. I think that's very important to highlight in this opportunity, but they're basically getting like a stipend to do this volunteer service that could lead to that could kind of foster their professional development. And students are able to get about $4,500 per academic year, and this is available for up to 8 semesters or 12 quarters if the student still has that active award. And we'll kind of dive a little bit more deeply into this with one of our panelists, but this also is open. The way that students take advantage of the opportunities, they are working at those they're volunteering at those host sites. I have to watch my own language with that too. And if you are a nonprofit who is looking to provide that paid professional development opportunity for undocumented students, you can actually apply to be a host site to host these students to volunteer for that. And I believe there's a application form for that, a very easy application form for that in the CSAC website. And then another opportunity that's also available to California Dream Act applicants is the College Core Fellowship. And these is also like a placement in different sites that work directly with K through 12, climate action and food insecurity issues. And fellows do earn up to $10,000 for this opportunity. And they also have access to those like professional development building tools like training and networking. And again, this is also attached to the California Dream Act, and students do need to be an AB 540 student and have a Cal Grant or Cal Grant A or Cal Grant B. I believe there is like 50, I think, institutions across the state who is participating in College Core, and there is a College Core coordinator at each campus who is holding the program. The priority deadline is June 1st for this year, but participating institutions may have their own deadline. So this is another thing to check with your campus, and another thing to connect your undocumented AB 540 students to if they are not aware of that yet. And then lastly, I think we'll hear a little bit more from panelists around this too. Another level, right, is to develop those inclusive fellowships for undocumented students themselves, or inclusive fellowships for all students. to provide that opportunity for undocumented students. And when we talk about inclusive fellowships, these are available to anybody, regardless of immigration status, and really does focus on providing like that hands-on experiential learning, training, and networking to fellows. This again is not necessarily employment, and the relationship between fellows and yourself, if you're the one holding the fellowship, right, is more around like trainer, trainee, advisor, advisee. And I think these kinds of language are really important to like differentiate it from employment, and can help navigate some HR conversations. We'll hear a little bit more about that later on. And the benefit of this really is for the fellow themselves and less so to your department, your organization. And that helps allow stipends to be given to fellows so long as they're not considered wages. And then we dive a little bit more deeply into this in our Creating Fellowships program resource that we will throw in the chat too for folks to check out a little bit more after this session.
And we also have additional considerations to take into account. So for example, there might be legal considerations that you are thinking of if you're trying to create opportunities for students. So we have this guide from President's Alliance that kind of has the FAQ option to it, where if you are wanting to create a fellowship on your campus, you're able to kind of see some tips on this. And then also, we do get a lot of questions on like background checks for undocumented students in higher ed. So we also have another great resource from the Undocu Higher Ed Coalition, which kind of also gives an FAQ on like things that you should consider or students should consider when doing a background check. And so those will also be shared at the end of the presentation. And we also kind of wanted to highlight an employee versus an independent contractor, knowing that a lot of these professional development opportunities can definitely enhance skills and help students to be able to use those in the future and maybe even create their own business or be an independent contractor. So just wanted to kind of highlight that an employee usually has materials, a computer, all of that provided by the employer. They could quit at any time without incurring liability. If they're an employee, they must comply with instructions about when, where, and how to work, and typically the employer is training the employee. Versus with an independent contractor, they do the same work for multiple clients. So an independent contractor would have their own tools and equipment and can hire and like pay assistants if they would want to. They receive all profits and they're held liable for all losses and debts, and they set up their own work hours and their own work schedule, and they use his or her own methods. And I think that when I talk to students about like what does it mean to be an independent contractor, a good example I like to set is, let's say I am throwing a party. I would need somebody to cater, maybe somebody to help with decorations, and maybe a DJ. I am not like employing all of these individuals that are providing those services. We have a contract together and they're providing a service for me. I'm not like setting their hours of like when they have to prepare everything before they get to the event. So that's kind of how I like to talk about independent contracting when talking to students, or maybe even using like if my car breaks down, it's like a specific job that you would be doing for me, and that could be like a contract that we have within each other. So that's wanted to highlight like the difference between that, and then we could go into the next slide. And here we also have a great resource where you could kind of have some tips on how to navigate those conversations, or just to help you get started with that conversation with students. So definitely getting to know the basics about income generation, understanding contracting and freelancing considerations, helping students develop an entrepreneurial mindset, identify institutional support with the support and develop partnerships with different community-based organizations. So just wanting to remind you all to have students stop and think and how to showcase professional development opportunities to grow into independent contracting or businesses. So there are a lot more details in the resource, but I thought that it was very helpful when talking to students about different opportunities in that format. And in the next slide, we will also see that you can also give students this resource. It's very similar. There's like similarities between the educator focus versus the student focus, but definitely has more considerations to take into mind when you are an independent contracting, like how to understand how to pay taxes or like understanding like the contracting itself or even marketing. So this is a great tool for you to give students who are in college and are already kind of thinking about that or might not even know that that exists or it's a possibility.
Right. And then something I just wanted to add is um, we know that fellowship and entrepreneurship are not necessarily the same thing, right? But thinking a little bit about how there's concerns with undocumented students, like, yes, I'm getting all these professional development now as a student, but like, how is this going to serve me later in my postgraduate pathway? And so I think thinking about too, if entrepreneurship can be part of those professional development conversations and opportunities already happening with your students and how these resources can be helpful in those as well. So I just want to mention that before we go into our panel.
Awesome. So great. We're going to go into our promising practices panel. We are so excited to have the panelists here with us. And we'll go ahead and highlight them. That way folks could see them. And I'll kind of let them also reintroduce themselves as well as kind of share a little bit about what they do and what institution they're coming from. And then we could go, anybody could go ahead and admit yourself.
Yeah, I'll just use my mention again. Hi, everyone. My name is Amritpal. As I mentioned, my pronouns are they, them, and I am the new staff member at the UC Davis Undocumented Student Resource Center. I am the Pathways Coordinator, and I'll get a little bit into that later.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Fidelia Flores. I am the Assistant Financial Aid Officer at the Financial Aid Office at Oxnard College, and I'm also the Undocu liaison here on campus.
Good morning again, everybody. My name is Kim, and I'm the director of the Dreamer Resource Center at Sacramento State, where we support undocumented students, students from mixed status families, and just immigrants overall.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and start this conversation. So we'll just start with the first question, which would be, what are effective strategies your campus has implemented to ensure undocumented students can participate in professional development opportunities? And anybody who's ready could go ahead and answer first.
I can just go real quick. Just for time's sake, I won't do the screen share, but I will share our website that does the direct link for what I'm about to mention now. But so yeah, one of the biggest ways that at our center and at UC Davis that we've really been working to, demystify undocumented students working on campus as well as like all across the communities, locally as well as like throughout the US, right? Is our brand new program. It's called Undocu Pathways Experiential Learning Opportunities Grant. This program provides direct funding for each quarter or semester that undocumented undergraduates, graduates, as well as professional students, right, are doing an experiential learning opportunity. What we don't currently do is we don't do the pairing, which I would love to do sometime in the future, right? That's a long-term mission of like having a student come to us and be like, hey, I don't have an internship, an opportunity, or a independent study going on, and I would love to do this program. That's the one thing we don't have right now, but what makes our initiative especially impactful for our school, right, or our institution, is that we have a very intentional structure right now, even within its first year of being launched. Where for undergraduates, they get $2,400 per quarter, subject to their financial aid package space, right? But if they don't have classes or the necessary background in whatever experiential learning that they want to get into, right? we offer a 1 unit variable credit through our collaboration with the Chicken X Studies program here at UC Davis, which ensures that not only are they getting their experiential learning aligning with their academic progress, right? They're also building community with other undocumented as well as BIPOC students who are in our program. So it's not a specific cohort-based model yet, or not sure what it'll be like in the future, right? But this is kind of our first step. And then we're also actively always encouraging our students who are in our undocumented pathways, as well as like folks who just applied, right? To also apply for our center's other grants and scholarships to also expand the range of the financial support that we can really offer them. And the other distinctive strength that I want to like really shout out for our center is that we do have, for the first time ever, right, in our 10 years of existence, we do have a dedicated financial aid officer, Leonardo Flores, whose info I'll also share there, but who works hands-on, one-on-one with our undocumented students to really demystify and I think just decode financial aid and also just develop personalized strategies with students as well as optimize their aid throughout the academic year. So what this includes is Leonardo working with students to figure out like, okay, well, what does your summer look like, right? If you want to look for opportunities, can we provide that funding? Can we make sure that maybe you stay in classes, or what is the way that we can ensure that you have all the necessities that you need to just survive and also thrive as a student, right? And then the other thing that I think really is good about our center is that we also have compiled really tailored email listservs, newsletters for all students who've ever applied, were accepted, or otherwise eligible, but didn't have like the financial aid funding space, right? For our different programs, not just Undocu Pathways, that we do connect with, right? And like send them opportunities outside of the UC, right? And a lot of them do come from Immigrants Rising and Undocu professionals, different organizations, right, that are really working towards this. So we have a very layered approach. We combine targeted funding, right, like Undocu Pathways, our other grant scholarships, the holistic advising that is not just Leonardo, but all of us as career staff, right, do. We're not academic advisors, but we typically do tend to do that kind of active work as well, right? And then the proactive outreach. I think those have really helped us ensure that at least our undocumented students on campus aren't just included, but really centered in our campus's professional development ecosystem. And a lot of our, campus stakeholders do depend on us and do come to us to figure all these things out. So we are able to like plug in our students and just really reach widely with this program. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it looks like your center has really worked on having like a wraparound services to really ensure you talk to students from the beginning and having that dedicated person to go over their financial aid. I think something that was really interesting is how you were able to work with faculty to make sure that they're able to get that 1 unit for their professional development, which also, of course, helps within their grades and it goes in their transcript. So that's really awesome to hear everything that UC Davis is doing. And then would anybody else like to also answer that question?
Yes, I'll go ahead. So here at Oxnard College, the financial aid office, we're very big on promoting our DSIG, is like finding ways for students to maximize their financial aid. So when the Dream as Service Incentive Grant came along in 2011, we were like, oh, we need to get this program started at the college. So for us, that made it very successful for the past years is we needed to get to know what are the requirements for our volunteer students to start doing volunteer hours on campus. So for me, one of the biggest initiatives is for me to know what are the requirements for the volunteers. So going through a contact person with our human resources, like, hey, what are the requirements for a volunteer student to get onboarded on campus? And they went ahead and explained that volunteers have to complete a certain form, for liability reasons. So making sure that those forms are completed correctly with whoever the student is going to be volunteering. Not only that, but like Madeline had mentioned about our D6 students, they're not student workers, so they're not fulfilling a student worker position. So the volunteer forms have to you have to make sure that you specify that the students are going to be doing limited work on campus. So like passing out flyers, greeting guests, doing a lot of tabling on campus. So like basic stuff. So they can't be, answering phone calls, replying to emails, because that's what a regular student worker does. So getting familiar, what are the requirements that human resources requires a volunteer, right? Because they won't have the same access as a regular student worker. And then one of the other requirements that our volunteer students require is that they need to go through a life scan. So understanding, like, okay, they need to go through a life scan. What are the documents that they're going to be needing in order for them to start the process? So a lot of our students, sometimes they don't have a California ID. So if they don't have a California ID, what are other documents that the students can provide when they're doing their life scan? So understanding the documents. So I always tell students like, okay, let's look at through the list. Let's see what you have. So I was like, do you have a birth certificate? And they're like, yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so that makes our secondary. Okay, so now, do you have proof of address? And they're like, do you pay a utility bill? They're like, yes. Okay, so we'll go ahead and use that. And then, do you have a bank account? And they're like, yes. Okay, a bank statement. So that's already two proofs of address. So then the student goes to our campus police because our life scans are done on campus and they're done for free. And the student just goes, submits the form that they're required to provide. And sometimes the form it says social security number, but if the student doesn't have a social security number, they can either leave it blank or they can use their ITIN number. And that's how they're able to complete the process with the life scan. Life scan is very simple. They just go through campus police. And then once they're set, then the student is able to do their volunteer hours on campus. So it's very important to get to know what are the requirements that require volunteer students to get done on campus. And that's what's going to make your DSIG very popular on campus. And people are going to want to know, like, hey, I want to volunteer. I want to maximize my financial aid. And that by knowing who's the main person with human resources, you're going to be able to get a lot of your student volunteering on campus.
Yeah, I think it's important how you shared that like you went and figured out the process for the student. I think even us sometimes we look at HR forms and we're like, wait, like we have to kind of digest it a little bit before we like proceed. So just having that step of knowing and being aware of like the process and then explaining it to students so that they're also not like scared to do it and they know that it's okay. Um, I think it's huge when it comes to being able to provide that volunteer opportunity. And I know it's very similar for a lot of schools where they do have to have that volunteer packet submitted to HR. Thank you, Fidelia. And then Kimberly, would you like to answer this question as well?
Yeah, I'll just add something short. With the DRC, we do have a partnership with the Career Center. I just put the handout in the chat, and so there are often career fairs on campus various times a semester. And so oftentimes undocumented students feel like they can't go to the career fair, they feel discouraged. And so that's a handout that we have created and that we send to our newsletter. And we have that available so they know what types of questions to ask, how to navigate a career fair as an undocumented individual. And that's definitely one partnership with the Career Center that I've been able to have. Second one is non-qualified scholarships. And I actually use Immigrants Rising handouts on fellowship to be able to create a presentation that I can share with campus departments and organizations and colleges so they can create non-qualified scholarships, which are in turn fellowships on our campus available for students depending on the funding sources that they have. So if they have donation money, so trust funds, they can use that money through a non-qualified scholarship to provide a fellowship opportunity for an undocumented student on campus. And so we've thankfully been able to do that successfully with several departments and such on at Sac State. And then just lastly with DSIG, Fidelia, you provided so much great insight on that. So I think the only last thing I would add for myself is I learned that by doing a workshop or a presentation, some folks want the one-on-one instead of a workshop or presentation. So I've really tried to do my best with meeting with like the director of the Well, which is our gym. So for any students that study kinesiology or just wellness or anything like that, I've met with the director one-on-one. I've met with the assistant director, and so they know me. And now I'm able to do warm handoffs and know that they're a trusted partner. And that's the same for all the cultural academic resource centers. I meet with all of them one-on-one and just create that professional relationship where I can trust them and they can trust me. And then I also do once a month check-ins with all the DSIG fellows. So I also make sure, is this the type of professional development opportunity you're liking? Is something wrong? Is there any like I should I check on your host site? So kind of similar to what College Core does. I do that for the DSIG fellows just to make sure that they are also being checked upon the entire semester. And then I also bother them about getting that payment request form because from what I learned last year, there have been a lot of applications submitted, but not enough of the students have actually moved forward with the payment request. And so I will message and message students, okay, even there's a week left, just submit it. And so those are just a few of the strategies I have.
Awesome. I really appreciate how you share that. Like, you not only do you help them find a placement on campus and like partner up with folks who might be needing DSIG students, but you also check in with them once a month just to see where everything's at. And then just making the process a lot easier for them when it comes to submitting that final form. Um, and so thank you for that. And then also, I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more, Prit. So, how has your campus activated and equipped advocates to support the professional development of undocumented students? And maybe what are some key like takeaways or changes that have happened that you could kind of share with the group?
Oh my gosh, I could go on and on about that. I'm like, it's a year-long effort. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I think the biggest thing that I can think of, aside from our direct conversations, advocacy, and just the one-on-ones with not just students but like campus stakeholders, is that we restarted our larger campus-wide, as well as like Davis slash SAC area-wide Undocu advocate program for educators, UPE trainings this year. It's a long little acronym, so I'll definitely drop the link in there as well. So our UPE training was launched a few years back, right? It's changed in iterations throughout each year that we've had it based on whatever the needs are at that time, right? And based on whatever our staff's needs are, as well as like the current times. And so for us, UPE specifically has really been a program that has created, I think, institutional capacity for us to really equip our faculty, staff, and other administrators, right, with up-to-date knowledge, skills, as well as like resources to support undocumented students holistically, right? And in its next phase, what we've had right now, that we started in winter quarter to kind of just see what it would look like, is we started a UPE 2.0 iteration, and the program evolved into meeting the current needs and like different efforts for what we're trying to do with our students right now, right, with inclusive fellowships, is focusing specifically on how departments on our campus and different academic units, right, can design and implement the different types of inclusive professional development as well as experiential learning opportunities. One thing that I have personally noticed, as this was under my portfolio in the year, is that some of the frustrations that come from our center with, or just from me, that comes with like some of the other departments or campus stakeholders not already having these kinds of programs as well as like language put into their work, right, is not that they don't want to. A lot of them sometimes don't have enough knowledge, right, don't have enough expertise, and so sometimes they are afraid, or like sometimes they're a little nervous to even like shift something on their website or shift a few sentences, or even speak about these things when they're doing their own presentations, right, or their own work with their students. And So what tends to happen for our campus is that, like many of you here, I'm sure, right, in the different departments and institutions that you're at, our center ends up becoming a one-stop shop. That's what I've been calling it the whole year, is we end up becoming the one-stop shop for people to, like, send their students, send their different staff members who might need the support that undocumented folks do need, right? And the UPE trainings that we have right now are really, really working towards making sure that we are not the one-stop shop, because although we do have so many different resources, and we are the campus's undocumented student resource center, we're also just 3 staff members, and we're not attorneys, we're not legal advisors. We do have right, we do have UCM, the Immigration Services nonprofit, and we do have an attorney that does work with us, who's amazing and helpful, but he works specifically with students, and he can also only do so much. So what we're really hoping to do in this, like, next year that we do these trainings as well, right, is that we empower and, like, just really foster that space where a lot of different campus stakeholders and just people in general coming, right, are not afraid to ask questions, and are not afraid to really just maybe even ask questions that for them might seem silly. Like, we've had people come into these trainings sometimes. We host about 2 a quarter. We've had some folks come in sometimes and either email me beforehand to ask if they could share a question anonymously, right, that I share in the training, because they're like, hey, this feels like a question I don't really feel comfortable asking in front of colleagues who might think that I'm already supposed to be up to date on this thing. And I think that's one of the bigger problems in higher ed as well, is that we sometimes don't give individuals or human beings, like, the chance to just learn. Sometimes, because we have so many trainings, we have so many HR requirements, we have XYZ, XYZ. Sometimes it kind of becomes a silo of all of us, assuming everybody knows everything because they're doing the work, right, alongside them. And so that's the biggest, like, I think, ethos about our UPE trainings, is we're not assuming anything about anybody that comes in, right? We start from the ground up. So our UPE 1.0 training talks very specifically about policies, laws, specific terminology, right, to do with undocumented communities, as well as the history of things like AB 540, DACA, no DACA, right, as well as, like, how the movement has shifted in the last, oh my gosh, 2.5 decades now, 2.5 decades, right? That's 1.0, and then 2.0 does delve very deeply into inclusive fellowship design and the differences between, like, something that Madeline was saying earlier, right? Like, traditional employment, like having that employer relationship versus, like, fellow and coaching, as well as, like, mentee mentor relationship, right? So the last thing I'll say about that is, when we did the iteration for winter, we tried something new, which was we actually had folks on campus who are doing this work join us in a panel. So not our students, but actual staff members. So this included our campus council, right? Who do provide more guidance for different departments on employment, right? The legalities around different things to do with inclusive fellowships. And then the other thing that we did do, right, is also we featured an amazing department on our campus that is currently working towards building more inclusive fellowships. So we invited our new student orientation center that does have an inclusive fellowship for the last 2 consecutive years, and it's really worked well for them. And they worked with us a couple of years ago to actually start building the language into their job descriptions, and then really just honing that and just running with it, right? And advocating for it, even if other folks around campus or administrators were telling them, like, no, it's not going to work, right? And then what that has done for us is it's really allowed folks who come into those trainings to understand, like, this isn't something that's going to happen within just, like, a quarter or a year, right? Sometimes this does take years of work, and what that sometimes can do is, of course, dishearten us, but by continuing this work for the years that we are doing it, right, and by also fostering this cross-campus dialogue that provides all these, like, operational roadmaps or options for all of us, right, we can empower departments and we can empower one another to move with intention to implement a lot of these different you know different different fellowships and internships that can really support our students beyond just, like, grants and scholarships. And I think that our UPE trainings do really break down the barriers of that, like, I think just, like, the parameters that we have for employment on campus. And we are hopefully, right, that's the key word, is we're hopefully setting new standards of, like, what undocumented student inclusion looks like beyond just posting an Undocu Ally sticker in your office. That's just the first one to me.
Yeah, thank you. I think something that I definitely took away from that is that not only do you provide like the workshops for students or like help the students with the placement, but you also host workshops for any individual who might be interested in having them. So I think that that's really cool having that opportunity for individuals or educators like around campus to also be able to be well versed in this information and then going above and beyond to any of those that might be open to updating their websites or including any of that language. So thank you for that. And then I see you shared the link as well. So thank you for that as well. And then so there is a question about DSIG. So the question is for students interested in the DSIG program needing to go through a background check and when they have to volunteer, if they are doing it, they might have to put their ITIN with everything that is going on with IRS and data. This could definitely be a barrier. It's definitely up to the student to decide if they want to proceed or not. Um, what we have known for now is that there's no sharing happening for background checks. It's only meant to screen for a criminal background. So if a student does have like an order of deportation or they are scared that something might be in their record, we always tell them to be referred to like the legal services. Some attorneys can also do like their own like version of a background check and see if anything is in their record before actually doing like legitimate one through the organization. So those are some tips that like we are giving students. Um, as we know, like the whole sharing with DHS is not 100% concrete of what that really means. But in terms of the background check, that's only screening for criminal backgrounds. And then that's a great segue into another question, which would be for Fidelia, especially since you have that financial aid lens and perspective with DSIG, is how has campus collaboration strengthened the DSIG implementation on your campus? And how were these collaborations created and not only created, but then sustained as well?
Yes, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint slide because I know we like to see numbers, right? So maybe you guys can see it. So yeah, so what made our program very big here on campus is how I started to find departments was that here on Oxnard College, we have a undocumented task force, and we are very connected with their Dream Research Center main person, which is Rosa. She's in the room. Um, she helps us promote DSIC on campus, and then also we have four undocumented liaisons in the financial aid office. So if I'm not here, they're also trained on how to help them complete the form. But we started, of course, the first year, it was right after the pandemic. So we started with a little bit of students. And after this program, we were able to get more students to get them to apply. But we started with the task force, like what departments that we were already connected that were able to house those students on campus. So from there, when the students share like, oh, I'm actually interested in volunteering at the library, I was like, okay, let me see, let me make it happen, let me call the main person at the library and see if they're able to take in volunteers, and then when they give me the okay, like, so then I went through the whole overview on how to complete the volunteer forms with our HR, and then from there I explained to them also about the life scan. But all those departments, it benefit them a lot because a lot of them may not have the budget to hire student workers. So they went ahead and rely on getting volunteer students. So currently, a lot of the departments that do take our volunteer students is our financial aid office, our Dream Research Center, and Basic Needs office. Both departments are run by Rosa Reyes. So she is very instrumental with her students volunteering with her. So it's been very successful. We have the Welcome Center, the library, Proyecto Éxito. Éxito works with their University Transfer Center and their Career Center. So students are able to get more aware of what are the availabilities that they have to be able to volunteer there. And then we also have the Career Education Center, our IT department, our institutional effectiveness and STEM center. So students are able to go and seek if they're able to volunteer on campus. I sometimes go with them and introduce them to the departments like that. If they're shy, they can go and like introduce themselves like, hey, I'm willing to volunteer on your department, and we get them started. But the way we promote our DSIG is we send all of our students who qualify for Cal Grant an email with either virtual or in-person workshops, and then after that we do a one-on-one um, appointment where we help them complete the form, and then we have them take the form to the departments for them to complete it because we want to make sure that the forms are completed correct. We do a lot of phone banking, so like if a student read the email but wasn't sure, like we communicate with them like, hey, are you interested in this program? We make it very um, interesting, like, hey, you can be one of the 1,667 students that can qualify for this program. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I'm interested. So then from there, we give them more information on how the program works, on how they can request payment. And then when we're doing the intake, we always ask, like, hey, do you currently do hours with a nonprofit? So if they do, then of course we help them also with getting the nonprofit approved through our DSEC, so like that they can get started. This past year, I had a student who volunteered with a nonprofit at a animal shelter where she fostered the puppies at home. She brought me the forms to the office. It's like, oh, I completed my hours. And then I saw that she was claiming 24 hours a day. And I was like, I don't know if they'll take 24 hours a day, but we'll go ahead and submit. So then we submitted, and the student was eligible for payment for fostering those puppies at home. So it was very successful for her to get that payment, because she was undocumented and foster youth student. So for her to maximize the grant benefit her a lot. So I always ask your students like, hey, do you currently volunteer with a nonprofit? Let's get you those hours paid through this wonderful grant.
That is so cool. I love that you have an intake form and you kind of already have those questions to kind of like vet them and see like if they already are doing something or if you could connect them with something else. I think like a question that comes to mind is that maybe other campuses might not have a DSIG person
Mhm.
from financial aid reaching out to them. In those cases, can like let's say I'm running like my own program, can I like reach out to the financial aid office and be like, hey, is there any DSIG students that are available? This is what I'm like looking at for to volunteer and kind of do it that way.
Yeah, well, sometimes we do get departments coming and ask, like, "Hey, do you have any students who are interested in volunteering?" So, like, one of them was our institutional effectiveness, who was looking to get volunteers to do surveys on campus.
Mhm.
But they went through the Dream Research Center because that's where they promoted it a lot. So, and then they connect with me and they're like, "Oh yeah, let's make it happen. Let's get students to also help out with surveys on campus." So.
Awesome. And I think it's really cool how there's no like it doesn't have to be in person or virtual. So especially as like now a lot of people are more well versed in the whole virtual or like working or I guess in this case volunteering from home opportunity, students might also have that available to them. Thank you, Fidelia. Um I think another thing I would want to address, and then maybe Kimberly, you could answer this one. How have you built campus buy-in to strengthen professional development opportunities on your campus apart from DSIG?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. There are just several things I want to know, and I think in these spaces there are oftentimes only one full-time professional staff, and so that has always been a challenge. I started as um, a coordinator, and I was the only full-time staff for well, the DRC at Sac State had only one full-time staff for several years. This January, I thankfully got that promotion. I'm now director, and I think the institution has really, our institution has really seen how impactful our center has been. And I think data has really, really assisted with that. And we don't collect student ID numbers, emails, none of that. So we have a ghost, we call it Herky the Hornet. We have a ghost Herky the Hornet account. So when students check in with us, it's like Herky the Hornet checking in. And so that has really helped us to show the institution that we are in fact meeting with over 100 students a month. You know, when everything was going on with the changes with FAFSA and California Dream Act, we did assist, you know, over 150 students with those renewals. And so I think the data really assisted us with showing leadership, that we needed more support. And so that is where we now have a coordinator and that also came on board. So I think with two of us, we've really been able to get that campus buy-in. And in turn, we've been able to develop many more resources for students. And so one thing I definitely want to know is that our president, President Luke Wood, met with students individually and in a group setting in the fall semester, and he really vocalized his support for them and for our center. And so with that, and with the new, you know, staff positions, we began creating trainings. And so that is really where I now had the capacity to make that PowerPoint to make that PowerPoint and to really take a step out of the day to day and start meeting with more and more folks across campus to build those relationships and to, for example, with UEI and just other campus entities to show them how to create those non-qualified fellowships. Um, and then we've also created our own version of an Undocu ally training that was just developed last year with a partnership with a professor that has student testimonies, and folks are able to take it online. And so I think by really showing the university the data and then also creating these the Undocu ally training and meeting with folks and just creating those more personal relationships, we've been able to develop many more resources for students. And so, one that I want to highlight that I'm very excited about, and I hope one day we can really expand like how UC Davis has done, is we've partnered with the Carlson Center of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and they started doing like an Undocu entrepreneurship workshop series. So once a month, they come do a workshop, and we really started doing those warm handoffs. We're hoping to create a boot camp this fall semester. So we're also developing, you know, and growing. And I think it really has to start from the top, you know, showing leadership the data and the numbers, and that we need more staff so we can be able to do more things to help students professionally. Um, and then one last thing for just the campus buy-in. We also have an Undocu task force, and so the Undocu task force meets frequently with our Office of Inclusive Excellence to discuss concerns, questions that we have. And so I think all of these behind the scenes meetings and data and you know, the Undocu task force, the things that we don't really showcase to the campus community per se, really help with that buy-in. So then we can have the resources and the capacity to create more opportunities for students, especially apart from DSIG.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And then, how were you able to develop if you said Huey the Hornet? How was that developed? Like, was that something that you went through IT, or how was that done?
Yeah, the Herky the Hornet. So Herky the Hornet, we developed that by meeting with I think we have CMS We use CMS and EAB. I don't know if every campus has that system, but there's one person, at least on our campus, that specializes in that. And so I met with him and explained to him the whole, situation where we want to show the data. And so meeting with him, which I think is IT/specialist in this program. He was able to create that fake Herky, the Hornet account, and they even have like a fake ID number and everything. And so that's really been helpful.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for that. And then I'll kind of have the closing question for the panel, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And this could be for anybody. What advice would you give to other campuses, organizations that also want to build professional development for undocumented students? So for example, are there any lessons that you've learned about scaling or even just sustaining the efforts?
Yeah, I can just go first if that's okay. Actually very similar to a lot of what Kim was saying earlier. Like when you were talking, I'm heavily resonating with a lot of that. You know, stuff of like for sure not doing the work alone, having the campus and institutional buy-ins, right, for different campus stakeholders. Those of course are like the first few things. Um, because I think that at our center, the thing that we're really telling ourselves right together as a career staff is um don't do this work alone, right? Like don't like we really don't want to be doing this alone. And we every week when we we have our staff meetings, we will always tell each other similar things like that because we end up talking about our work and we're like, yeah, I'm doing XYZ, I'm doing XYZ. And then one of us will be like, no, stop right there. And I think that that's definitely important of like understanding that this work is not just on one person, right? This is not work that is just for one position or one center, right? It has to be a collective commitment. And when we move away from, isolated solutions, right? And like, oh, this one thing or this one student, right? And really focus on the larger campus-wide change for undocumented students that doesn't just come from our specific organizations or centers, right? But a larger campus culture. I think that is when we are succeeding. And even in what we've learned, at least in our center, is through the last 10 years, right? All of these institutional no's were not actually no's. They were just not yes, right? And that can be from any kind of precedent, right? In the past, where, oh, we've never done this, or this seems a little too risky, or this is something that nobody's gonna really like or want to really like put the effort into, right? And sometimes these are the true barriers, is like understanding that like the no's are just for that moment, for that time being, for that academic year, right? And I think that, and like Kim, what you were sharing, right? Like it does help to keep coming, and as well as Fidelia, right? Like with the data, it does really help for us to be coming back, consistently when we are told the no's, right? With the data, with the stories, and the creative policy approaches and interpretations, because um this is the type of work, right, that does require building that infrastructure that lasts beyond us being in our positions, right? It's codifying practices, training allies, right, like in the UPE trainings and some of the ones that y'all have also mentioned, right, and advocating for permanent funding, and so that programs don't depend on us being the individual champions and the MVPs. And I only laugh because we, again, like we talked about this a lot. And I think that that's the thing of what we're trying to get rid of this year, right, is having our center as the one-stop shop. Like that is no longer going to fly. That's not something that we are okay with anymore. And at different points in our center's history, right, like that has had to be the case, because yes, we need to make sure we're the ones advocating for our students more than they are already doing, right? We don't just want our students to survive in college, right, or even as undocumented individuals in the rest of their life cycle. We want to focus on how do we make sure they're not just surviving here, but also thriving, right? And same goes for all of us, right? Like, how do we ensure that while we're doing this work, we're not just always constantly burnt out, but feeling accomplished, right? Like, how do we come into our offices or our meetings or our specific day-to-day life and whatever work we're doing? How do we get to still honor ourselves, right? And how do we get to still keep our mental health not just intact, but good? And I think that that's been the key for us this year. It's like really seeing like, okay, if something and this is more of just like I think our work culture, right? It's like if something doesn't seem like it's serving us, right? Or if some sort of campus stakeholder just right now is not going for something, we're just putting it on the back burner and moving on and focusing on the ones that will support us, right? And I think again that I think for me as someone who's just come into the position, it feels like something that I'm definitely very grateful for because I've been in other positions in different organizations where I've had to come in and be like, oh my God, we're starting from scratch. Like and I know and like so many of us have had to do that, be the community organizers, be the educators, be the advocates, even though those might not be our job positions and we're not even getting compensated to do those things. So I think that's the biggest thing I can say at least right is and kind of end that note is don't do this work alone and don't let yourself, right, as an individual get siloed and get pushed aside. Stay committed to the work you're doing, but also ensure that the campus buy-ins aren't like, taking everything from you as an individual. Because again, this is not one person or one center's problem, right? Like this is an entire systems-wide, institution-wide collective commitment. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think you summarized that all too well. And I just want to highlight, like, for any of us educators that have tried in the past and it was a no, like maybe it's time to go ahead and make that ask because it was no at that time and it could be maybe a yes this time. And then Fidelia or Kimberly, would any of you like to answer this one as well?
Yeah, so one advice that I would give is that if our Dream Research Centers currently do not have a dedicated person and financial aid, start building that relationship so like that you can gain more students to maximize our financial aid, especially for DSEG, because if those funds are not being used with the state, then of course our future students won't be able to utilize DSEG in the future. So we want them to take advantage of that the grant. So start building that connection with other departments as well. Like, hey, are you is this something that you're interested? And then also connecting yourself to your HR people. Like, hey, what are the requirements? They're required to do a background check, what can they submit? So every district may have different policies. So like it's just one of them that we do here with our district that they are required to do a background check because it's a liability thing that they have to have. Let's say, for example, if someone were to get hurt, so that's why they need those documents in hand just in case if that were to happen. But get the connection. If you currently do not have a task force built, that's how you're able to also get other people to be part of this, like getting more departments getting involved on how to host our student volunteers. So, like, if you have any questions, if you want to get to know how we got this, I'm happy to meet one-on-one and go over how Oxnard College was able to be very successful with their DSIG volunteers. But yeah, just start building that relationship with your departments.
Yeah, I definitely see a theme of like it's not just one person, it has to be multiple folks in this work. And then Kimberly, feel free to share.
Thank you, Maria. I think an advice I'd like to give to their campuses and orgs is definitely going back to wellness, as many of us that full-time, usually the only full-time staff, or we have multiple positions in one. Um, I think the first step is to take care of yourself before you can go ahead and take care of others. And so definitely go on walks, take stretch breaks, eat your lunch. I know there's so many times when I just forget to eat or I'm too busy to eat. And so definitely take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And to building professional development opportunities, I think marketing goes a long way. And on top of building those relationships, to hop off on what Fidelia is saying as well, is of course building the relationships. But if there are no students asking to join DSEG, then there's no students to make the warm handoffs to. So really trying to figure out what's the best marketing strategy for you, whether it's social media, newsletters, Canvas, is there maybe like a Canvas shell that you can create? screens across campus and so forth. So I definitely think that the marketing element for the DRC at Sac State was extremely helpful. We even had like an interest form. Are you interested in DSIG? And then we had our graduate assistant or student assistant contact students and see if they met the eligibility criteria and then help them out. So I definitely think the marketing goes a long way.
Awesome. That's so cool. As you were like talking about the Canvas shell, like definitely working with financial aid and anybody who is eligible for DSIG, just putting them in that shell and it appears there. That's like a great conversation starter. So thank you for that one. But I definitely heard like self-care, community care, and like collaboration with others are like some of the big themes that are coming up. Um, I also don't see any questions in the chat. Madeline, did anybody private message you?
I did get a question around a lot of folks have been talking a lot about like building relationships, right? Collaborations. But I think this person was a little curious, like what if there's some resistance or fear from your campus or from the department you're trying to build the relationship with, right? Like they're not maybe as willing to do that support. I'm wondering if folks have any advice on how to navigate that. I think especially now that there's a lot going on federally, like how are folks kind of like holding that, navigating that, and still building those advocates despite maybe some hesitation.
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, I think the question is just around like if there's some like maybe hesitation or resistance in like building relationships to support like undocumented students. Is there anything that's been helpful to kind of like work around that for folks?
I think for me, when building relationships, there's definitely always hesitance. Even when it comes to DSIG, they're like, what do you mean they do volunteer hours and get paid? Who's paying them? Or, there's always so many questions and definitely hesitance, especially if folks are meeting me for the first time. They don't know who I am, so they're trying to navigate whether they can trust me or not. And so I definitely think that um, not just one meeting, but if you see someone that has that hesitance, maybe trying to do a follow-up like, okay, think about it. Like this is what it is. Here's a handout, here's the link. Like this is all of the concrete evidence. And then also talking about confidentiality. And I think the President's Alliance, I know Immigrants Rising, and I believe also CSAC put out different statements on confidentiality. And so really just sharing that with them to make sure that they also know that everything that is being said or given to or whatever the case is safe information. And then from there I would do a follow-up. So think about that, marinate on it, and then a week or two later, possibly a week later if we're trying to speed things up, hey, I'm just following up. Have you, to show them that I am being persistent and I'm really like looking out for the student and I want them to, to figure it out with you and your space. And I think for me personally, if I see that they're just like, nope, then on to the next. There will always be an ally. So if that's not working out, I definitely someone else will say yes.
I just want to, yeah, actually similar to what you were saying, I was thinking of, so at our center, when we think of like building those campus relationships, right? And then of course, it happens all the time, even for campus like ours, where it does seem like, we have these programs implemented now, right? We do encounter the hesitation as well as resistance, right? I think being very strategic is key. Understanding that, yeah, if they're saying no or resisting now, that might not mean the same thing in the future, right? At some point. So what we do, and as Daniela has said it before, right, is like we try to approach it like chess, not checkers. Just laughing. Which is like, yeah, if one path is blocked, as Kim, you're saying, right, like just move in another direction. And so for us, what at least I will speak for myself is that yes to working with folks and continuously outreaching. At this moment, what I've been just doing is like, okay, well, it's a no. All right, just like move on. Like not even at this. I think as an undocumented queer person myself, I'm just sick and tired of having to kind of plead to people, right? To be like, hey, we are worthy of this, we need that. At least for me personally, I'm at that space where I'm like, all right, you don't want to do it, okay, whatever. And then just moving on and building with the people who are open, right? And who do have those instant yeses or that instant excitement, like might not know exactly what to do, but are like, hey, like I don't know what to do, but this is where I want to start. I want to nurture these relationships or connections with you all. And also don't be afraid to try new angles, right? Like if especially if like you have reached out to someone before in the past, right? Like even a year or two ago, but a quarter ago, a semester ago, try it. Yeah, try it again, like you were thinking, right? And then if you do meet resistance, just remember again, not every no is permanent. Sometimes it's just the timing, the framing, as well as just like that specific campus stakeholders' priorities for that year, right? And then if if things really don't shift, like you are going back to this person or this institutional organization or center, right? Um, hardest thing to do, but biggest thing to do for yourself is reflect on the fact that this is not a reflection of your work, right? Your efforts or your community's efforts, right? Or your career staff's efforts or the students' efforts. This is a reflection of the systems, right? On the institutions. And so that's the hardest part sometimes. And it's just about reflecting on that, knowing that yes, it's hard in the moment, but you have to keep moving, you have to keep building, right? And trust that even the small shifts, right, can create that long-term change, meaning it will take years sometimes. Sometimes it'll take a quarter, sometimes it'll take a week, but it will happen at some point. It just might not be through you directly sometimes, and that's okay. Again, reflecting on the fact that this is systems wide, right? Institutional wide change. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think with that, that was the only question we had privately. But I wanted to go ahead and just give a huge thank you to all you three for just giving us some of your best practices on your campus, being willing to like share about it as well. We will be sharing your emails at the end of this presentation, but as well as with the materials after. So just again, a huge thank you, and it was great learning from you all. And then we'll go ahead and go back to the slides for a quick wrap up.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for listening to us and for the fellow panelists and the moderators and hosts. Thank you. It was really helpful to be here.
Awesome. So we do want to go ahead and um, just hear back from you all. So this is the second part of the Slido. So again, if you could pull up your phones or join through your desktop and just let us know what are some of the key insights that you're taking from the panel discussion. And this could be anything from when we first started talking about it, or maybe any ideas that came up that were maybe not like specifically mentioned, but it kind of had a light bulb moment. So I'll give folks a couple of minutes to go ahead and answer that. And then thank you, Madeline. The information's also on the chat if you want to join through the desktop.
And folks can also put even just questions that's coming up for them, right? Following any of the panels, resources, things like that shared. Like, what are you taking away from today's session?
All right, so I see folks are starting to join and answer. I see a couple folks also typing. Yeah, D6 a huge one. I think it still remains underutilized. Yeah, building rapport, finding other partners and resources, opportunities, resources, and collaboration. Roles in other departments are essential, such as financial aid. Yeah, especially because you could see what students are eligible for. Um, so I'll give a couple seconds for folks to finish typing. Yeah, DSIG is a huge one, I see. Yeah, prioritizing well-being as professionals is a huge one. Building pathways with other departments and organizations. Okay, thank you all for engaging in that. We'll go ahead and continue.
Great. Yeah. And if you want to just type your insight here anyway, but we don't have a chance to look at it, please do that. I think it's helpful for us as facilitators of this space to also understand what folks are taking away from it. Okay. And then, so thank you all for engaging in that last takeaway with us activity too, to hope that there's a lot of kind of like insights, strategies, resources, even questions that folks are coming away with this space. I think we saw the popularity of DSIG, right? And just like how can that be an opportunity that's more leveraged in your campus? We will start kind of closing up this space and do want to hear how this session went for you. And so please we do want to give some time to do our evaluation as well. That's available here through this QR code. I'll throw the link in the chat as well for folks to do that. And we will be sharing this via the email that we will share with all registrants. So if you don't have a chance to grab the link now, you can grab it later, but please take some time to do that as it's helpful for us to figure out how we're going to structure future sessions. And as Maria mentioned, this is our final Promising Practice Roundtable of this spring semester because the semester or the academic year is coming to a close. I can't believe it. And so this will also be useful for us in understanding what topics to cover in the future. And even though this is our last session of the academic year, we do have other like resources and things going on within the organization as well. And so if you are not signed up to receive our Undocu Digest yet, please do so to get a little bit more about our resources, events, and just any news, highlights, and support relating to the undocumented community. And you can go ahead and email me to get that to get added to that listserv. If you signed up through our Airtable for this event, you should have also had a chance to check off the Undocu Digest box to get that. But if you're having issues with not receiving it, please reach out to me directly. And then just some additional Immigrants Rising offerings I wanted to uplift in this space is our mental health connector is live. And so these are for undocumented students in California who are looking to get that free and confidential therapy from a licensed therapist. These are virtual services that's offered for free to all undocumented students in California. They just must be 18 and over. And then we also have updated our guide for undocumented individuals traveling in the US. So things to consider around the Real ID, for example, and just some latest guidance around and considerations around immigration enforcement in certain states. We know there's lots of scary things happening, but we do want our community to be equipped. And these are still things that they can do, right? The travel, for example. And then lastly, if you have not heard about our Spark Entrepreneurship Learning Hub, this is a good place to get the foundation around entrepreneurship and how folks can generate income through contracting or business startup. And then I think we might skip this. If you do have topics you want to have for next year's roundtables, please just put it on the evaluation form. There should be room to do that there as well, just to be mindful of time and to encourage folks to fill out the evaluation form. We'll throw that link again in the chat. And then I do want to close out with some of our contact information here for folks who are part of our panel, and then give it back to Maria to close out the space for us today.
Thank you all for being with us. I know that it is like the end of the semester, but we're definitely getting prepared for the upcoming conversations for the roundtable. So please, please, please feel free to share anything you would like to know about. That way we could make sure that from our end, we are all addressing topics that are relevant, that would be good to know. Happy end of the academic year. I hope you also have a chance to celebrate your students, but also yourself for doing the work that you are doing. It does take a community to help undocumented students. So thank you all for the work that you do. And I think with that, we are done with this year's PPRs.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Fidelia.